Hey everybody, welcome to Crazy Tech Lab, and we have an interesting video for you today because we are going to be looking at this cooler here, specifically how to install a 360mm all-in-one liquid cooler, specifically the MAG Coreliquid I360 that we've got in from MSI at the moment. So this video, both a guide on how to install this specific cooler into your case, but also how to install an all-in-one liquid cooler, specifically a larger 360mm model into your case, how to check for compatibility before you buy, which cases are compatible, and the plus sides and downsides of a very large liquid cooler like this. Does have excellent cooling, obviously, a massive radiator and a powerful pump, but are there some downsides to opting for such a large cooler as well? So we're going to be looking at all of that stuff in the video today. So if you want to learn how to install a liquid cooler, specifically this one as well, you can check it out later on in the video. So everything else that you need to know is covered for this cooler in my recent review of it, which you can see in another video. Check the link in the description down below or in a link up above to see how this cooler actually performs, and you can check that out in my other videos as well. So that's it for the intro. Let's crack on with a look at how to install a 360mm liquid cooler. Something that's really important with your liquid cooler is to establish whether or not the case that you either own or that you're going to buy is compatible with the liquid cooler that you want as well, because the radiators with liquid coolers are pretty large, and there are some cases that do have some limitations there or can't even fit some of the larger radiators on the larger liquid coolers out there, like the MAG Coreliquid I360. So what we're going to do now is just have a look on a typical website. This is MSI's website, and we're going to have a look at one of its cases that we're going to be using in a minute, the Gungnir 300R. And as we can see here, it's got a really useful section on fan and radiator support. So most case manufacturers will have this kind of section, and they will list the radiators that are compatible with a particular case and the positions that they're compatible with, because the front of the case is usually the place where you can find the best radiator support. The roof is usually as good, but occasionally you can run into problems if you're trying to fit a larger radiator, such as a 360mm radiator up there. So, and here we've got a really great design from MSI here with this section, because we can see the different kind of radiator sizes. So we've got the smaller 120mm radiator sizes up here, then we've got 240mm, that's about how big they are, and then we've got the larger 360mm version with 3 fans. So that's the difference between these radiator sizes, is basically how many fans they have. So 120mm has 1 fan, a 240mm radiator has 2, and 360 has 3 fans. So that's what we can see here is where we can install the different radiators. So in the Gungnir 300R, we actually have the option of installing it in the roof or the front section of the case. So, or if you're going with a custom liquid loop with multiple radiators and that kind of stuff, you can actually fit multiple radiators, up to 2 360mm radiators in this case at the same time. So another interesting fact over here is that we've got an option to select 140mm fans and radiators, and here we can see that we can fit basically dual 140mm fan radiators or 280mm radiators. So they have 2 140mm fans on one side or the other, or both, and you can fit one of those in the roof or one of those in the front of the case. So obviously you need a very large case to fit a radiator that has 3 140mm fans on it. So that's 420mm radiator, which is obviously pretty large. So here it's just a bit of fun. You can actually just click on the fans, and you can actually see where the fans can be installed in this case as well. So we have a triple 120mm radiator or 360mm radiator, so we can just flip back here, and in this case specifically we can mount it in the roof or the front of the case, and we are going to be mounting it in the roof because I think that looks better, and also I prefer to have the hot air expelling out of the case to start with, rather than just kind of dumping it back in as you would do if you have it in the front. There's nothing wrong with installing it in the front, but either you want it in the roof or the front of the case. I just prefer it in the roof because I think it looks nicer as well. So that is how you check whether or not your case supports a radiator. And as I mentioned, most case manufacturers will have something similar to this on your case model's website. So it's very important to double check that the case that you have you're looking at the correct model page for it. Make sure that there's been no revisions of that case and you're looking for the current version or the version that you looked at. There might be like a 2020 model of that case that's been refreshed a couple of years later or something. So just make sure that you get the exact model so you have an accurate readout of what radiators or the size of radiators that it supports and in what places. So first up, we're going to do a close-up of the all-in-one liquid cooler just to see what we've got, especially if you haven't used one of these things before. Now, the great thing about the MSI MAG Coreliquid I360 is that everything is kind of as you need it to get it installed into your case. For example, all the fans are pre-installed. That doesn't often happen out of the box with most liquid coolers out there, so that just means that you don't have to deal with the screws, you don't have to worry about the fan placement or anything like that. Everything is done for you. And something else that's done for you is a lot of the cable tidying as well, because if we have a look down the side of the radiator here, we can see that there's this big kind of clip, and I'm just going to remove that now. And as you can see in here, all the cables are actually tidied away for you out of the box. So this saves you a huge amount of time, and it's something that a lot of people struggle with when they own an all-in-one liquid cooler, is making it look great. So there's often a lot of cables to deal with these things. And also, as you can see here, there's like 12 screws installed as well, pre-installed, so you have to deal with all the screws, you have to worry about which way around to get the fans, etc, etc. You don't have to worry about any of that with this particular cooler, which is why I highly recommend this one, especially if you haven't bought one before. So all of those cables run to the end and they basically finish in these two here. So on this side we have the 4-pin fan cable, and you can connect this to your CPU fan header on your motherboard, because you want these fans to basically react to your CPU temperature. So definitely a great way to control them. And of course, all 3 fans are controlled through this one cable because everything is tidied away. And basically MSI has added a splitter cable in here to connect all of these fans to just one header. So super, super easy in terms of your cable tidying. And it's done the same for the RGB cable as well. So something else we should mention about the RGB lighting is if we get the cable for the pump section, which is down here, we have a splitter cable for the RGB lighting. And the reason why we have 2 connectors for the RGB lighting is one that we've got here has holes in there. So it's a 3-pin RGB connector. Pretty much every motherboard out there has a connector for this kind of RGB connector for the lighting. And the reason why we have 2 is because the other one actually has pins on the end. And the reason it has pins on the end is because we can actually connect the connector from the 3 fans up here down to the pump header down here, and that means that we have kind of daisy chained our RGB lighting connector from the pump, which means that to power the lighting on the pump and the fans, we now just have a single connector. So the only other thing that we need to worry about is the pump power cable. So that's the 4-pin cable here. This ideally needs to go to the AIO liquid cooler or pump header on your motherboard, and we're going to be looking at where you can actually find that in just a moment. So it's important to connect that one to the pump header, because the pump header is generally designed to run at full speed all the time, which is what you generally want to run your liquid cooler pump at. You don't really want to have it spinning up and spinning down, because a lot of liquid cooler pumps don't like running at very low speeds. They might actually stop running, which is not good. But most pumps are designed to run at full speed as well. Things are a little bit different when you come to custom liquid cooling, but with AIO liquid coolers like this one, you generally want to run that pump at full speed. So if you do connect this to your motherboard, just make sure that you connect it to the AIO liquid cooler pump header, or you configure another header to run at full speed. So that's pretty much it with the actual radiator section. As I mentioned, these fans are pre-installed out of the box, which is great news, saves you a huge amount of time. And other than just connecting the radiator into your case, which we're going to do in a minute, the only other thing you have to worry about is the pump section. So first and foremost, this is something that a lot of people fail with. Just make sure that you remove that plastic protective sleeve on there to reveal the bare copper underneath. It's very easy to forget to do that. So I'm going to do that right now before I install the cooler in the case. If you do forget about it and you install the thermal paste onto your processor and then this thing just sits there, you've got this horrible plastic layer between your processor and the copper, and that can drastically impact your thermals. So definitely get rid of that and then you are good to go. But I would leave that until, you know, in the final hour or two before you actually install your cooler. I wouldn't remove it before then, because this plastic protective layer is there for a good reason, and it's just to stop scratches and those kind of things getting on that shiny copper base plate down there and potentially impacting your thermals. So just going to put that down while I get rid of the protective layer. You don't really need to keep it, but you can probably put it back in the box. You might want to sell the cooler again at a later point, and it just might improve its value if you include the sticker down there. Now, another great thing about the Coreliquid i360 is that we've got every single kind of mounting mechanism here for all current processor sockets. So that's not something you usually get with liquid coolers. You very often have to kind of swap these things out, but you don't have to do that here, because as you can see, we've got mounting points for AMD, and we've got mounting points for Intel, and we've got also additional mounting points here for another way to mount this to an AMD socket, which is just using the standard socket clips, and we've got all the connectors that we need for that in the box. So it's a great idea, but with MSI here, to just kind of include everything onto this one cooler, so you don't need to swap anything out. Now, some coolers do include the thermal paste pre-applied, but as you can see here, out of the box, there is nothing on this cooler, and I prefer it this way, because if you do have the paste pre-applied, it's very, very easy to damage it or accidentally wipe it off. And if you do that, you basically can't proceed with your installation, because you won't have any thermal paste left, or at least that thermal paste could be compromised. So I much prefer having my thermal paste in the box so I can apply it myself when I need to, and MSI has done that. And what we've also got here, as well as the stick of thermal paste that we can see down there, is a brand new accessory set from MSI. So this is, I believe, new with this cooler, or it might have been introduced very, very recently. But what we've got here is a nicely laid out accessory set, so you can see exactly what components you need. So over here, as you can see, we've got the AMD standoffs. If you want to use the thumb screws and a 4-point mounting mechanism for your AMD system, that probably gives a nice clamp down for this cooler for the optimal cooling performance. We've got the Intel standoffs over here as well. So the AMD standoffs will connect to the stock AMD backplate on socket AM5, or the stock backplate on socket AM4 if you've got a slightly older system. With Intel, it doesn't really have a backplate, so you have to use this thing here instead. These are the thumb screws up here that you just basically lock the mounting plates down onto this thing, or onto your AMD system, and then the pins that you can see up here, they just kind of thread onto these thumb screws down here. But we're going to look at this in detail in a minute. Now, something else that I mentioned is that there is the AMD clips here. If you don't want to remove your clips on your AMD motherboard, you can actually use these hold down clips here, which is a much easier installation. If you're a bit scared of removing stuff on your motherboard, I can fully appreciate that. Just use these things instead, and they kind of hook over the existing clips on your AMD motherboard. You might see better performance going for the standoffs though, because they provide a decent 4-point or 4-corner securing mechanism, which is generally a little bit better. So the other things that we've got in the accessory pack, obviously there are no fan screws in here because our fans are already pre-installed on the cooler, which is great. What we do have are some screws to secure the radiator to your case. So on the rear side of the radiator, which I will just show you now, we have a whole bunch of screws, threaded holes, as you can see here. So that's what those screws are for. You only really need the 4 corners to be secured, but obviously if you're a stickler for these kind of things, then you'll probably want to use all the threaded holes, and that is what these screws are for down here. So as you can see, it's got case screws down there, and they just fix from the top side of the radiator, and that is pretty much how you would install it, probably into the roof of your case, and have the air being expelled, the warm air from your processor expelled directly out of the case. So that is pretty much all we need to go through with the accessory set and what you get in the box, because there is literally nothing else in the box other than what you see here. So it's a great design from MSI, very easy to install, and it's why I highly recommend this cooler as your first liquid cooler, or just something that's very easy to install. So what we're going to do now is just talk about the other aspects of your cooler and how to actually install it into your case and make sure that your cooler, such as this one, is compatible with your case in the first place. So let's go and do that. Okay, so the first part of installing your liquid cooler is to get the socket mounting mechanism installed onto your motherboard, whether it's an Intel one like this or an AMD one like this. So we have all the accessories that we need down here, and I'm going to be going through both the Intel installation and the AMD one. And with AMD there's actually two, because there are two different ways to mount the cooler to your motherboard, or at least there is with this one. There might not be with other coolers, but there are generally two ways to mount a cooler to the socket AM5 or socket AM4, so we're going to go run through both of those. But we're going to go through the Intel one first, so I'm just going to get the AMD motherboard out of the way for the moment, and then we are going to move the motherboard here, and then I'm just going to zoom in on my camera so you get a slightly better view of what I'm actually doing here. So the Intel socket basically comes like this, exactly as you see it here. So install your processor first, and then you can reach into the accessory pack and grab the backplate. Now, if you're not sure about how to install your processor, Intel or AMD, I have a great guide that you can see elsewhere on my channel. I'll put in a link in the description down below, or you can see a link in the banner up above as well. It's very, very important to watch that video first, because the processor socket pins are extremely delicate and very easily damaged. So you don't want to be messing around with those if you don't know what you're doing. So once we're here with the processor installed, you can grab the backplate for Intel from your processor kit, and then what you want to do is just flip your motherboard over and get these little pins in the backplate to slot into the holes around your motherboard socket. Now, I've just removed this backplate, so mine's slotted in nicely, so you can see the little threaded holes kind of poking through down there, all the four corners. You might need to adjust them a little bit to get them pointing through all of those holes, and then what you want to do is just lay the motherboard down on a flat surface so you can connect the socket pins. And with Intel you have 4 of them, and they look like this, and they will be different between AMD and Intel, so don't be tempted to cross match, mix and match all the different pins. They are different heights, and if you use the wrong ones for an AMD or Intel system, you could potentially have a really, really bad day, because your processor might not be cooled properly. The pump might literally be hanging off the socket. So definitely make sure you get the right ones, and they will be easy to identify, because as you can see here, we've got the 2 different mounting pins, and one has a notch in it, this one, and the other one does not. So they're easy to identify. So the ones with notches in them are the Intel ones, so we need to use those. So I'm going to put the AMD one back down, and we're just going to quickly screw these in. With Intel, at least, there is no right or wrong way to, well, there's no wrong way to install these. They have identical threads on the top and bottom, and the threads are the same length on either side as well. So there's no wrong way to thread them in. And just going to get the last one in, and do them up reasonably tight. You don't want them to be to come loose when you're installing everything else, so that is pretty much all you need to do. Just get them nice and tight there. So that is pretty much all you need to do with Intel, and what we'll do now is move on to the AMD installation. And the only other thing you'll need to do is obviously mount your motherboard in the case. I prefer to mount the motherboard in the case and then go ahead and install the radiator, but just so you get an idea about what you'll actually be doing once your radiator is installed in the case, we're just going to bring it around now and get a little close-up here. What you want to do is just install the pump onto the socket as shown here. So you have the little pins poking through the mounting plate on the cooler, and you want to do that with either Intel or AMD. So that is what you'll be doing when you install it. I prefer installing the motherboard first and then installing the cooler, so that's why I've done it this way around. So that's it for the Intel one. Let's move on to AMD. Right, so here we are with a socket AM5 motherboard, but this process will be pretty similar if you're using an older socket AM4 motherboard as well. So we have 2 options here. So first and foremost, the easiest way is to secure these things onto our cooler, and then as you can see, they've got little clips on one side, and those clips hook over the clips on the motherboard around the processor socket on the motherboard here and here. So that's an easy way to do it. Out of the box, a lot of coolers might come with a slightly different mounting mechanism. Our cooler does as well, but it has an alternative one. This is maybe the easiest way to do it. The other way is to actually remove these brackets here and here, the two black brackets, and then that gives you a slightly better mount, and you might see slightly better temperatures as well. So what I'm going to do first is connect these to our cooler, because you do need to remove the stock, or secure these to the stock mount basically. So what we're going to do, we're going to do that first, and then we're going to go ahead and do the second method, which is to remove the brackets here. So first and foremost, we need to get the motherboard out of the way, and then we need to bring the cooler across, because these screw directly onto the existing mounting plates on the cooler. So what we need to do is delve into our accessory pack again. So it's looking pretty light on here, as we've used pretty much everything now. So we have the 4 AMD screws. That is what we are looking for. So nicely labeled pack, 4 AMD screws, and those screws are to mount the mounting clips either side like so. So we are going to go ahead and do that now, and as you can see, there's the little clip that clips over the clip on the motherboard, and then you secure it using that thumb screw. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So it's pretty easy. We've just got 4 very, very small screws to deal with. Just make sure that you don't lose them, because they are very, very easy to drop on the floor. And you'll need a fairly small screwdriver for this, because they're quite small screws, but this one just seems to fit everything, so that's why it's usually not too far away. So we are going to mount that onto there. So the easy way to work out whether you need to mount it from the bottom or from the top is where the thread holes are. So the thread holes are actually on the cooler plate here. So that means that the screw needs to pass through our clip and then down into the threaded holes. So if in doubt, look at the instructions, but if you use a little bit of logic, that's going to be the way that we install it. So going to get that first one secured down, and then our life should be a little bit easier, because it won't be wobbling around all over the place. So just that one to go. Super, super easy. And that's one side done. So as you can see here, this thing is adjustable up and down, and once you've got it hooked over, what you do is just gently tighten that screw down, and it's all thumb screws. You don't need a screwdriver, because there are no threaded holes on that side. So this is a very similar mounting mechanism to lots and lots of other coolers out there. A lot of coolers will have the option to do what you're doing here as well. So to have this one, which is the simple installation method, because it doesn't mean that you have to remove the pins on the brackets on the processor socket, sorry. But it does mean that you have to go through a little bit more of a process to fit these things. So I'm just going to get the other side on now, and then we will be ready to install it, and then we can move on to the other mounting mechanism for AMD. So just got one more screw to go. And again, on this cooler, there's only one side, or two sides should I say, and I've just lost that screw. See how easy they are to lose. That's another reason why a magnetic screwdriver is very, very important with these things, because you can just kind of pick it up out of anywhere. In that case, it actually fell into the radiator between our fans on the cooler. So there we go. So as you can see, you can only fit these things here and here. They won't install on the other side. So with this cooler at least, it's pretty foolproof. You can't install it the wrong way around, and obviously you don't want to install them on this side, because everything's kind of going to be the wrong way up. So if you look at things here, we've got the clips on the same side as the copper here, and then we've got the thumb screws on the same side as the pump, and that is what we need to do. So now the next step, as I mentioned, is to install your motherboard and then install the pump to it. I prefer doing it that way around, but what I'm going to do here is just show you how to actually secure these things in this video, so you know what you're doing later, because it was a bit difficult getting some video with the cooler in the case. So what you want to do is just get one clip hooked over the bracket on the motherboard and tighten it a little bit, and then you'll probably have to loosen the other one a little bit, or quite a bit, and not so much that it falls out, which it might do. Don't worry if it does, just kind of loosen off, and there we go. So we have both ends now connected, and as you can see, I'll do a bit of a close-up down here. We have the thumb screw here, and then we have that clip that's hooked over the end of that bracket, and that is the same for both sides. So that is all you have to do with that mounting method for AMD. We're now going to have a look at the next one. Okay, so we are going to look at the second mounting mechanism for AMD sockets now, and what we have here is the standard socket with the black brackets here installed. So the first thing we need to do is actually remove these. Very, very easy to do. Just got two screws on each bracket, and I'm just going to remove that first one. And you just want to make sure that you keep those screws safe and the brackets, put them back in the motherboard box just to keep them safe, because even if you end up using your PC for a couple of years and you never remove the cooler, you might want to sell the motherboard at some date or return it under warranty or whatever. Obviously that's very, very unlikely if it's an MSI motherboard. But yeah, you just might want to do it whatever motherboard manufacturer you have in your case. So that's the two black brackets removed. So as you can see, I got a nice close-up of these things now. So there's the little clip that you mounted the previous mounting mechanism on. So we need to kind of get rid of those now, and I'm just going to remove all the thermal paste from my fingers, because guess who's been testing coolers and processors recently? It just gets everywhere as much as you try and clean up. So there we go with the socket. So we're kind of ready to go here. And the next thing you need to do is to mount the AMD pins into the threaded holes on the socket. So we're going to go ahead and do this now. You want to get them as tight as you can with your fingers. You don't need to use pliers or anything like that. There's no mileage in doing that whatsoever. You're just going to potentially damage the threads and make it impossible to remove later on. You definitely don't want to do that. So just finger tight is all you need with these, and obviously try and not cross thread it, which is what I sort of nearly did there, but I think we got away with it. So yeah, for some reason a couple of these are a little bit stiff, but it's just a case of swapping it over. It's usually the AMD bracket that's sort of fault. The threads can be a bit iffy sometimes. So there we go, we've got our 4 pins installed on the processor socket like so, and that will then mean that our cooler can be installed as well. So we are going to drop that down here, and as you can see, the 4 corners have little protrusions out the end like so, and the pins just pass through them. So we are going to lock that down now and make sure that it doesn't come loose at any point. And then we're going to just grab all of these things and put them in one by one, just very loosely, finger tight for now. And this is literally just showing you how it works, because obviously we need to put thermal paste on first, but we're going to be doing that a bit later on in the video just to see how things go for now with the different mounting mechanisms. So, and this is pretty easy to do with your motherboard installed in the case as well. You can just use a screwdriver. I'm just using my fingers here just to kind of get it finger tight for the purposes of this video, because we're actually using the Intel one for our system build later on. So that is pretty much it for our cooler. So as you can see here, we've got the 4 AMD socket mounts here, and this differs from the previous way that we looked at purely because there are 4 mounting points here. So this generally provides a firmer mount, a more secure mount, and a more level mount as well. So you might often see a slightly better cooling performance doing it this way. So that is how you do both AMD sockets and or both AMD mounting mechanisms and also the Intel socket, and you can then move on to install the radiator and pump in your case. Now, in this video, I'm going to be assuming that you know how to build the rest of your PC, but we're going to be showing you how to actually install a large liquid cooler like the MSI Coreliquid I360. So I prefer to have the liquid cooler out of the case to start with, so build my PC and then install the cooler, because otherwise you have some pretty heavy hardware kind of dangling off the processor socket, which can make installing your motherboard quite difficult. Now, as you can see, as we've already gone through, we've installed the mounting mechanism for the cooler. So everything is in here waiting for us. And because the cooler is so simple with so few cables, at least with the Coreliquid I360 that we've got here, it's very easy to install it when everything else is kind of done. So what we need are the screws from the accessory pack, which we have. Okay, so here we are with our completed case, and hopefully I shouldn't be here telling you how to build a PC. I'm assuming that you have that knowledge already. What we are going to be looking at is how to install one of these, the liquid cooler that we've got here today, the MSI MAG Coreliquid I360. And as I mentioned earlier, you can see a review of this very cooler in another video that was out earlier today. So I prefer to have the liquid cooler out of the case, have my PC ready for it, and as we looked at earlier, we've already installed the mounting mechanism for the cooler in there, so everything in here is ready to go. And the reason why I like to do it this way round is because if you have the cooler strapped to your motherboard before you install it, it just means that you've got this whole weight kind of dangling off your motherboard, which can make it a bit tricky to install. So I prefer to do everything afterwards. So the first thing that we should do, because installing the actual pump section over here is so easy, what we're going to do is install the radiator first. Now, the most important thing with a large radiator like this is to test fit first, and obviously this is another reason why it's useful to do this once you've built your PC, because you can see where everything is best placed. And as we can see here, the tubing is best to run from the front of your case. So the radiator is going to be installed like so, and you have the tubes coming down at the front of your case. And the reason why I prefer doing it like that is because the tubes are kind of meant for that sort of stretch back over towards the processor socket, like so. Hopefully you can see that down there. So the pump section kind of going back over towards the processor socket, and that also means that there's just the right amount of slack with the cables to reach over, but not enough to kind of dangle down into your graphics card. And obviously we've got an RTX 4080 Super here, which is going to be having its fan sat at the top. We don't want those tubes dangling down into that fan. So having the radiator mounted like this in the top of the case with the tubes at the front is just generally a better way of doing things. So I'm just going to remove that for a second to talk about how you need to prepare your case for doing this. And hopefully there's not too much. We've got the MSI Gungnir 300R here, which is a really, really awesome case for installing liquid coolers. It's got loads of space in here, some really great features. And the first thing you need to do is be able to access the radiator mounting grooves and holes, or whatever your case has got in the roof. And with this case, what we have to do is actually remove the top dust filter like so. So this is a magnetic one, so super easy to install. And in the roof of the case, you can see that we have a whole bunch of rails. So these are basically adjustable fan and radiator mounting rails. So they've got kind of long grooves like this rather than just single holes, because it allows you to move the radiator backwards and forwards as you see fit. Now, it doesn't really matter what holes you use, because they are basically designed for different sizes of radiators. So the radiator that we've got is 120mm, or it uses 120mm fans. So we need to use either these two grooves here, or those two grooves there. They're 120mm. And then if we wanted to raise the stakes and go for a larger 140mm or 280mm radiator, then we would have to basically drop down, and we would have to go for something like that. So basically the larger holes for the wider radiator. But yeah, we don't need to talk too much about that now, because we're talking about our large 360mm radiator, which uses 120mm fans. Now in this case, what's generally better is just kind of aligning the radiator in the case, if you have the option, as far away from the motherboard as possible, so you're clearing the memory and heat sinks and all that kind of stuff. We don't have too much to worry about in this case though, because we've got a fairly standard size radiator, and the MSI case that we've got here has loads of clearance between the top of the case and the top of the motherboard, so we don't really have to worry too much about that. But if I just tip the case over, you can hopefully see what I mean. So here we can align the radiator mounting holes here and here, Or if we wanted to have it a little bit closer to the motherboard for whatever reason, we could just slide it across. And then, as you can see, it actually aligns here and here. So that's kind of all you need to know about the mounting holes, is that they do allow you to shift the radiator backwards and forwards as you see fit. Generally, it's better to have it away from your motherboard, just so there's a bit of extra airflow and the fans aren't blocked for any particular reason. So what I'm going to do now is just hold that radiator in place and grab the screws from the accessory pack that we saw earlier. So they're kind of small screws like that, short stubby ones that go in the radiator. And what I'm going to do is just try and get the radiator kind of aligned, and then what I'm going to do is whack a couple of screws in the middle, because that will allow the radiator to kind of support itself, or allow those screws to kind of support the radiator without it kind of dragging to one side and potentially ripping the screw through the grooves here. So going to get one screw there, just making sure, just not crazy tight, because we might need to do some adjusting in a minute. And going to get the other screw over the other side, so still supporting the radiator. It can be a little bit tricky to do this. Often, if you have someone else to hand, it can help to have them hold the radiator. So I'm just going to whack another screw in over the other side. Always a little bit trickier doing this on camera, but hopefully you can see the gist of what I'm doing here. So with those two screws in, that radiator is now secure, so it's not going anywhere. So we can actually go ahead and install the rest of the screws. Now, you don't have to install all 12 screws here, but as a bare minimum, I would go for the 4 corners. And you're always going to drop some screws. And as usual, the floor will probably only give up 50% of the screws that you drop onto it. Usually those screws have a habit of just disappearing. Just the life of a PC enthusiast, basically. So having each screw in each corner just means that that radiator is absolutely not going anywhere. But obviously, I know those of you with OCD and that kind of thing, like myself, will probably want to use all the screw holes, even though it's not strictly necessary to do so. So I'm not going to bore you by installing all of these screws on camera, but you get the idea. So basically, using these small screws that come in the accessory pack, and these are clearly labeled in the amazing accessory pack that comes with the MSI Coreliquid I360. And just going to fit that last corner screw in right now, and I'll fit the other couple of screws in a minute. So that radiator is firmly secured now, and as I mentioned, you can go ahead and install the rest of the screws if you want to, but it's not strictly necessary. So then what you can do after you've done that is just to slot whatever dust filter you've got in the roof. Not all cases have these, some do, some don't. If you have removed it, just be sure to put it back in. So for the next bit, I kind of like to have the PC on its side, because it just means we get a good amount of light going into the case and we can actually see what we're doing. And especially when it comes to connecting all the fan cables as well. So we're going to have a look at those in just a moment. So first and foremost, we need to get our pump section installed. So here it is, and obviously make sure that you have removed that protective film on that side, because your world or your weekend or whenever you're doing it will definitely be spoiled if you've suddenly find that you've got sky-high processor temps and you're not sure why, and then yeah, you've got a big bit of plastic on the underside of your processor cooler sitting between the processor and the pump. So definitely don't want to do that, and we've all been there. So first things first is to get your tube of thermal paste, and we're going to apply that to the processor now. So I like to do a long thin line, like right in the middle, like so. And then just kind of square that off by a couple of corner blobs as well, just to give like a I'm just going to do a slightly longer line, because the stuff didn't come out quite as readily as I thought it was going to. So yeah, I'm a favour of that method, like the line in a thin line in the middle with corner blobs. just to make sure that you get good coverage. You can't really put too much thermal paste on here. It will just kind of squidge out the edges, but you can definitely put too little. So I like to err on the side of caution and just put probably a little bit more than I should do, just to make sure we get a good contact down there. But definitely don't go putting any more than that down there. So that's all we need to do for the thermal paste, and now we can go ahead and just place the pump section down here. Now, depending on what cooler you have, you might have a slightly different arrangement going on, and with this cooler though, we are just going to lay it on top and little bit of a fiddle getting it to sit over those mounting holes, and there we are. So what I'm going to do now is just grab one of the mounting thumb screws and just secure that with my finger. So that's one of the little mounting thumb screws, and we're just going to go down over here and secure that onto the processor socket, just to kind of hold things in place. And then we're going to grab another one and do the diagonal side, because that way everything is kind of held roughly square, although we obviously need to do the other two. So I'm just doing these finger tight at the moment. We will go around with a screwdriver and do them. But now you've got two down, the thing is kind of secure and it's not too lopsided or anything like that. So we are just going to do the rest of these things just finger tight for now, because we don't want to tighten it up one side, because that can potentially cause the thermal paste to spread a bit unevenly or just have an uneven mount of your cooler. So we're finger tight on there now, and that is looking absolutely great. So all I'm going to do now is just go down and just gently tighten these off, and again in a diagonal pattern, so we have a gradual pressing down onto the thermal paste, and then just kind of go around and give them one last final tighten. And that's it. So that is our processor cooler installed. That is the radiator installed up there. We've got our tubes neatly run round with plenty of clearance between our graphics card and where the tubes are going to sit, so they're not going anywhere. Our radiator's not going anywhere. So the last thing we need to do is to actually plug everything in. And the great thing about this particular cooler is that we have so few cables to deal with. We've just got one off the radiator, which splits into two for lighting and fan, and then we've got one running off the pump section, which again splits into the power for the pump off this 4-pin, and then we have a daisy chain for the RGB lighting. So what I'm going to do first is connect the RGB lighting together. So the RGB lighting connector from the fans and the radiator to the RGB connector on the pump, and that means we just now need to connect this to one of our 3-pin RGB headers on the motherboard. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that now, but not before angling my camera up so you can actually see what I'm doing. And it's very, very easy to actually install that, because as you can hopefully see on there, there's 2 pins on one side and 1 pin on another out of the 3. And that means that you can kind of only install it one way around onto the connector, which we've just done there. So now we've got 2 other connectors to deal with. We've got the AIO pump connector down here, and that wants to be connected to the AIO pump header on your motherboard, which in this case is that one. So the last connector we've got is the radiator fan connector. So this is the single connector that powers all 3 fans on the radiator, and we are going to connect that to our processor fan header, which is usually the one closest to the processor socket usually, but it is labeled if in doubt. So that is our cooler ready to rock and roll. So what we'll just need to do now is to kind of tidy our cables away. We're just going to kind of ping them up to the top of the case, and that way we can actually pull them through the other side and just kind of tidy things up here, because at the moment, as you can see, things are kind of pinging out. But that is pretty much it, guys. So we have our processor cooler installed, and yeah, it's looking pretty sweet. Very, very easy to install this one, and we've gone through the installation of the processor socket mounting mechanism. We've gone through the radiator installation up here, which is super easy, and we've also gone through how to install the pump and when to do this all as well. So as I mentioned, I prefer to build the rest of the PC first and then install the radiator and water pump down there. I just prefer doing it that way around, but you might find it's easier to mount the pump first and then mount your motherboard and then do the radiator later or something like that. So purely up to you guys how which way around you do it. I just prefer doing it this way. So that's it. Let's finish up, get it powered on and see how it looks. So that's it for the video today. Hope you found it informative. Don't forget to chuck me a subscribe and a like on the video as well. And don't forget to comment. Do you think that this guide was informative? Would you like to see more? And let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Liking and commenting just helps support the channel and helps punch me through the algorithm. And talking about supporting the channel, don't forget to subscribe to it and to hit that bell icon to turn on notifications so you are notified when I upload new videos as well. So that's it from me today. Thanks for MSI for supporting the video today and sending over the MSI Coreliquid I360 as well. I think it looks great in white, but obviously also available in black too. You can see links to all the products that we included in today's video in the description down below as well. So thanks for watching and I'll be back soon.